Good day, everyone. For today's topic is about Introduction to Statistics. Before we proceed with the discussion for today's meeting, first let us know what are the objectives that being set for today's lesson. So first is to explain the importance of statistics. Second is to pose problems that can be solved using statistics. And lastly is to formulate simple statistical instruments. And without further ado, let's start with our lesson for today's meeting. Statistics is a science that involves the efficient use of numerical data relating to groups of individuals or trials. It is related to the collection, analysis, and interpretation, including data collection design in the form of surveys and questionnaire. So that is widely known as statistics. So statistics is defined as the science of collecting, organizing, presenting, analyzing, and interpreting numerical data to efficiently help the process of making decisions. Now, as per the definition of statistics, it will help us to make a decisions. So, for you to further analyze and to further understand how statistics helps us to make decisions in our everyday life encountered. So later on is I'm going to discuss what are the use of statistics. Okay? So next is let's move on with statistician. Statistician is defined as a person who works with applied statistics and is particularly eloquent in the way of thinking for the successful implementation of statistical analysis. Also, statistician is someone who is particularly well-versed in the way of thinking necessary for the successful application of statistical analysis. So for this whole semester is I will teach you how statistician think. Kasi 'di ba in your practical research too is you need to apply different methods of statistical treatment for you to conduct your chosen research topic. And statistician will gonna help you to find out what are the necessary statistical treatment that you might use on your research. But, statistician is masyado po siyang mahal. So, as for this subject, which is statistics and probability, ang gagawin ko is ituturo ko lahat sa inyo yung mga nalalaman ko na statistical treatment that you can use on your research para hindi na kayo magbabayad pa ng statistician para makagawa kayo ng statistical treatment for your research. Next is another important aspect of statistics that you need to know and you need to deal with is to be able to differentiate a sample and a population. But first, let us start with the population. So when we say population, it refers to a very large amount of data that would making a census would be very impractical or impossible for you to conduct. However, sample is a subset of the population. Usually, samples are collected in statistics, usually from the samples in order to make conclusions about the population. Now, paano natin ma-differentiate si population and si sample? Pag sinabi kasi nating population, that is a very large amount of data, which means yung respondents mo is napaka-rami. However, sample, that is just a subset of the population, which means Which means, if this is your population, which is a very large amount of data, itong si sample natin is just a subset of the population. Which means, kung ano yung nasa loob ng population, okay, yung mga nasa loob na yan, ang kukunin lang natin for the sample is just the subset of it, which is itong mga to, yung mga maliliit na yan. Okay? Yung mga maliliit na yan. For example, ano example natin ng population? For example, yung population natin is senior high school teachers of the Philippines. Ayan, pagpasensyahan nyo na yung sulat. Okay, so if the senior high school teachers of the Philippines is our population, now, ano yung pwede nating sample na kunin? So, for example, pwede nating kunin na sample is just the male teachers of the Philippines. Diba? Pwede yan. Or kaya naman, pwede din naman na private teachers of the Philippines. Or kaya naman pwede ding public teachers of the Philippines. Which means, itong si population, ito yung as in pinakamalaki. Okay? That is a very large amount of data. And that from population is kukuha lang tayo ng mga chunk niya. Okay? Hindi natin lalahatin. Yung ilan lang doon sa mga chunk niya. For example, ang gusto ko lang i-population is just the private teachers of the Philippines. Diba? Kasi kapag nilahat natin na teachers in the Philippines or senior high school teachers of the Philippines, so diba, masyado siyang marami. So for us, para hindi tayo masyadong mahirapan is, ang gagawin natin is just take a sample out of the population. Which is, kukuha lang tayo ng mga group na nandun under kay population, which are senior high school male teachers, or kaya naman senior high school female teachers, and the likes. So that is the difference between sample and population. We're in population, that is a very large amount of data, and sample is just a subset of the population, which is kukuha ka lang ng chunk na nanggaling dun kay population. Okay? So after discussing the difference between a population and sample, now let's move on with areas of statistics. So for the areas of statistics, is we have two areas of it, namely descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So for this subtopic is we will find out, or how can we find out the difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So first, let us define what is descriptive statistics. So when we say descriptive statistics, it is used to describe the basic features of the data, which means you are just describing the data that you've gathered. So for example, in Mabini, okay, let's say na 7 out of 10 of the girls of Mabini prepared a basketball player rather than an ML player. So ibig sabihin, mas prepared nila na talagang sports yung gusto kesa sa e-sports. So that is an example of descriptive statistics, which are you just like describing the data that you've gathered. So another example of descriptive statistics is Lexus LS 460 owners reported 27 problems for 100 cars during 2007. So ano ibig sabihin nito? So that 27 problems, meaning from year 2007, ilan yung na-encounter nilang problem? Ang na-encounter nila is 27, which means 27 out of 100 cars experience problem. Okay? 27 out of 100 cars of Lexus LS 460 encountered problem on year 2007. So if you are just describing the data itself, that is what we called descriptive statistics. However, inferential statistics used to find out something about the population. It is also known as statistical inference or inductive statistics. Also, inferential statistics tries to reach conclusions that go beyond an existing data, which means if you've already got the sample from the population, okay, so once nakuha nyo na yung sample, and then after the sample is kukunin nyo naman yung data, diba? So after gaining the data or getting the data, next is we will get the conclusions out of it. So how can we get conclusions out of the data? That is using inferential statistics. Which means kapag sinabi nating inferential statistics, using the data that we've gathered, we can make conclusion. And that is inferential statistics. So most of the major statistical treatments or inferential statistics that being used is called the general linear model. So what are the examples of general linear model? So that general linear model is a family of statistical treatments such as regressional analysis, t-test, analysis of variance, and many others. Okay, so that is an example of the general linear model. So using that kind of statistical treatment is, so anong ginagamit na nating statistics doon? We can go or we can get a conclusion out of it. Ang ginagamit na natin doon is inferential statistics. So meaning kapag describing lang the data, that is what we called the descriptive statistics. And then kapag nakamake tayo ng conclusions out of the data, so that is what we called inferential statistics. Okay? So another example of inferential statistics is based on a sample survey in 2001, 40.6% of male school teachers in the Philippines are smokers. So about 60% of the smokers talk of quitting smoking, and out of this 25% had tried at least once. So since there are inferences about the population, so di ba meron tayong population na kinuha, and based on the sample data, so ano yung sample data na kinuha natin? That are the male school teachers in the Philippines. So we refer them as inferential statistics. Okay? So now, my question is, in Shopee or Lazada, where can you find the use of statistics? So I'm going to answer it. So diba, in Shopee or Lazada, is we can find the answer in ratings, which is by giving them stars. Now, for example, if I will buy a certain item in Lazada and the rate is 2.5, the stars that na nakita ko is naka 2.5 siya. Am I going to buy it despite of how beautiful the pictures are, how editing the picture is? Diba? The answer is no. Why? That is because of the ratings itself, diba? It is 2.5. So, ano yung nakikita nyo? That using statistics is, it can help us to decide on things if whether we can buy it or not. Diba? So, kung walang statistics, wala kayong statistics na nakita dyan sa Lazada or sa Shopee, bibili ba kayo dyan? Knowing na, sabihin na natin na napakarami na seller na nandyan. Pero, if walang guarantee or walang magagaranti na gaano kaganda or gaano kapangat yung product, bibili ba kayo? Di ba hindi? And that is one of the use of statistics. It helps us to make decisions. So, ibig sabihin by using statistics is hindi tayo magpapadalos-dalos sa desisyon. Diba? Iisipin muna natin na 2.5 lang yung rating pero maganda naman yung nasa picture eh. So, ikaw, kung makikita mong 2.5 yung rating at kahit maganda yung nasa picture, bibilhin mo pa kaya? Diba? So, syempre hindi. And that is one of the use of statistics. It helps us to decide whether you can buy it or not. Okay? So, isa lang yan sa maraming dahilan kung bakit kailangan nating pag-aralan ng statistics. Diba? So, statistics help us to help decisions in our daily life. So, mathematical statistics deals with the development and expositions of theories that serve as the statistical methods. Statisticians use mathematics to come up with statistical methods. Now, bakit puro lang ako statistics? Saan naman papasok si probability? Okay, so probability theory falls or will help us to understand or to appreciate the rationale behind the techniques used in inferential statistics. Which means the statistics and probability will go hand in hand. Diba? Hindi lang si statistics yung may encounter natin. Ibig sabihin, ito pa lang si probability will help us to understand what is the rationale behind this kind of statistics. Diba? Bakit ganito? Paano siya nakatulong? So, si probability, dun siya papasok. And for today's lesson, or for our whole statistics and probability lesson, is we will focus on the methods under inferential statistics, that is under applied statistics. So, why we will focus on inferential statistics? Bakit ma'am hindi na lang kayo descriptive? So, di ba, descriptive napakababaw niya. So, kung gagawa ka ba ng research, gusto mo is i-describe mo lang yung data? Di ba hindi? Mas gusto mo na makakagawa ka ng conclusions out of it, na masasabi mo na that particular assumption of us is really good, na talagang kapag in-apply mo to, merong magbabago. So, sasabihin sa'yo ng tao, paano mo naman nasabi? Ay, statistical treatment. And that is what? That is inferential statistics, na buo tayo ng conclusion out of our data. So, ayaw lang naman natin, di ba, na mag-describe lang tayo ng data. Gusto din natin na out of our data, meron tayong conclusion na mabuo. Na hindi lang tayo hanggang sa pagde-describe. Right? Okay. Okay. Next is the sources of data. So, for the sources of data is we have two types of it. But before we proceed with explaining what is the difference between the two types of the data, first, bakit nga ba natin ginagamit si data? Or bakit natin kailangan? Diba? So, isipin nyo, how can you provide results in your research output? Ano yung kailangan nyo? Okay, ang kailangan nyo, Diba, ang kailangan natin to provide results is data. Diba? So, for us to support our hypothesis, ano yung kailangan natin? Data. So, now, now we will discuss two types of data, which are, first, let's start with primary data. So kapag sinabi natin primary data, we are talking about the original data. Okay? Original data of an experiment or observation that has not been processed or altered. So ibig sabihin, itong original data na to, ikaw mismo yung gumawa at wala pang nakakagawa. Wala kang pinagbasehan ng mga authors, wala kang pinagbasehan ng tao, ikaw ang kauna-unahang gumawa. So, anong example niyan? So, for example is the speed of vehicles under a new highway. Diba? So, itetest natin ngayon yung speed ng isang vehicle sa kakagawa pa lamang na highway. So, if this was the first study, diba? Based on our sample, this is a first study. Therefore, that is a primary data. Which means, kapag ikaw pa lang yung nakakagawa, primary data. Ikaw pa lang yung as in na original na pagkukuhanan nila ng source. Ikaw yung batayan. Diba? So, another example of primary data is the census of population and housing conducted by the PSA or Market Research Project conducted by the private sector. So, kapag sinabi natin primary data, ano nga ulit yan? Anong tinutukoy? Kapag sinabi natin primary data, we are dealing with original data. Okay? However, if we are talking about secondary data, we are dealing with any materials that has been collected from published records, such as newspapers, journals, research papers, and so on. So, bakit tinawag nila secondary data tong mga to? So, for example, for newspapers, makakagawa ka ba ng newspapers without any references? Makakagawa ka ba ng balita without any references? So, di ba kapag sa newspapers at ikaw lang yung pinagbasehan mo, yung sarili mo lang, hindi na siya balita. That is what we called chismis na. Diba? Kapag ikaw lang mismo ang nakakaalam at gusto mo lang na ipangalat sa iba, hindi na yan newspaper. I mean, hindi na yan news, hindi na yan balita. Chismis na yan. So, diba? So, for us to have a content on our newspaper, kailangan natin ng mga references. So, next, how about journals? So, di ba sa mga journals, kailangan din yan ng mga references to support their claims. Also for your research papers. So, how can you say na, bakit ganito yung topic mo? Bakit ito yung pinag-aaralan mo? Saan mo nakita yung research gap na yan? Diba? So, saan mo nakita? So, di ba, nakita mo siya saan? Sa isa po, ma'am, na curious ako, ma'am, kasi isa siya sa mga recommendation din sa research ng isa sa mga nabasa kong research papers at nagandahan ako kasi napakarami pa palang research gap. So, why not find out for it? Kung hindi nila natapos, pwede ko namang ituloy. Diba? Ganon. So, kapag sinabi natin secondary data is merong mga tao or itong gawa natin is kailangan pa ng mga supporting claims or supporting evidences for us to prove for it. So, another example of secondary data is the details of imports and exports that were compiled by the PSA and the Bureau of Customs for the declaration made by the importers and exporters. Okay, so that is one of the examples. So, this material is obtained by the administrative reasons for compiling the statistics of overseas trade, including the imports and exports of price indices. Okay? So, ulitin ko lang, kapag sinabi natin primary data, we are talking about the original data. And however, kapag sinabi naman natin secondary data, ang tinutukoy natin dyan is any published materials, okay, such as newspapers and the likes. Okay, next is let's move on with the types of variable. So we have two types of variable, namely quantitative variable and qualitative variable. So first, let's discuss a quantitative variable. So kapag sinabi kasi natin quantitative variable is we are talking about numerical scale. Okay, ang keyword natin kasi dito is numeric, which is we are talking about numbers. Diba? So, quantitative variable usually defined as measure. It measures or identifies based on a numerical scale. So this type of variable can be analyzed using statistical methods and can be shown using diagrams such as tables, graphs, and histograms. Okay, so kapag sinabi natin quantitative variable, we are talking about numerical scale. Or we are talking about numeric or numbers. Okay, so out of these numbers is we can illustrate them using various of graphs, okay, or various of diagrams. So under that quantitative variable is nahahati siya sa dalawa, which are discrete variable and continuous variable. So paano natin ma-differentiate yan? Pag sinabi kasi nating discrete variable is it can be measured by counting or enumerating. So ibig sabihin, 'di ba kapag nagka-count ka or nag-i-enumerate ka, walang butal yan or walang labis. However, kapag continuous variable naman is it can be measured. 'Di ba? Name-measure siya. So, ibig sabihin, di ba kapag nagme-measure tayo, minsan meron niyang mga labis-labis. So, yung mga labis na yan, ang tinutukoy ko dyan is the decimal. Okay? Decimal. So, ibig sabihin, dito kay discrete variable is whole number. Whole number lang siya. However, dito kay continuous variable is pwede siyang whole number and at the same time, decimal number. So, kapag nagka-count ka, makakount mo ba yan? Makakount mo ba yan? Diba? Kapag nagka-count ka is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, diba? Walang labis, walang kulang, mga walang butal. So, anong example niyan? Number of children in a family. So, diba? Kapag bibilang ka na, ilan ang anak mo sa pamilyang ito? Sabihin mo ba 3 kalahati? Diba? Hindi. Sabihin mo, ma'am, 3 po, 4 po. Diba? So, magulat ka kapag sinabi mo is 3 kalahati po ang anak ko. Ano yan? Manananggal? Hahahati? Diba? Okay. Next is continuous variable. Itong continuous variable naman is, it can be measured. Ibig sabihin, hindi natin siya pwedeng mabilang. Diba? But, hindi man pwede natin siyang mabilang, pwede naman natin siyang ma-measured. An example niyan? Example niyan is kilos of rice. Diba? Yung mga butil ba ng bigas is bibilangin mo talaga isa-isa? Okay, sabihin na natin mabibilang mo. Kaya mong bilangin yung butil ng bigas. Pero, ang tanong, hanggang kailan mo bibilangin, diba? Sabihin na natin mayroon akong sabihin na natin mayroon akong 10 sakong bigas. Ang tanong, mabibilang mo ba lahat yan? Talagang pagpapasensyahan mong bilangin? Di ba hindi? So kapag ganon, saan siya papasok? Kay continuous variable. Wherein, hindi mo man siya mabilang or ma-enumerate, but you can measure it. Diba? So another example of it is weight, height, and temperature. Okay, so that is the two kinds of quantitative variable, namely discrete variable and continuous variable. Also, for the qualitative variable, so move naman tayo. So, tapos na tayo sa isang types of variable, which is quantitative. Yung pangalawa naman is qualitative. So, itong si qualitative, kabaliktad na lang naman niya ni quantitative, which is non-numeric. Okay, kabaliktaran. So, ibig sabihin, kung di mo mabilang at hindi siya na-measure, edi qualitative. Diba? But, take note, these two kinds of variable can be combined in your research. Pwede siyang, yung research topic niyo is pwedeng maging qualitative and then at the same time quantitative. But as for now, I will suggest na isa-isa muna kung quali, kung quanti. Diba? So for the qualitative, so considered as the opposite of the quantitative variable as it describes certain types of information. So that is the two kinds of variable. So ulitin ko, we have two kinds of variable, namely quantitative variable and qualitative variable. And under quantitative variable is we have two kinds of it, namely discrete variable and continuous variable. Okay. For our last topic or last subtopic that we're going to discuss is the levels of measurement. So these levels of measurement is under what? Kanino siya pwedeng i-apply? So this level of measurement is nabibilang siya kay quantitative variable, which means kapag quantitative variable is we can measure it into 4 levels of measurement. Okay? Ulitin ko lang, itong si quantitative, itong si quanti, we can measure it by 4 levels of measurement. So, dito muna tayo kay nominal at kay ordinal. Okay, so first let's start with nominal level. So, for the nominal level, so data are sorted into categories with no particular order. Which means, meron lang tayong category, wala namang order. Which means, hindi mo matutukoy or hindi talaga natin matutukoy kung sino yung mas lamang. So, anong example niyan? Ang example niyan is gender. Diba? So, for the gender, we have male and female. Pero ang tanong, itong male and female ba, you can justify na mas lamang si male kaysa kay female? Diba hindi? So, kapag ganyan, that is an example of nominal level. Next, let's move with ordinal level. So, itong si ordinal level naman is, we have two categories. Namely, okay, so we have two categories. So, the criteria for it is we have categories. So, meron siyang categories. And then, at the same time, is meron siyang ranking, which is nagre-range from low to high. So, ibig sabihin, itong yung criteria ni ordinal is merong categories and then at the same time, naka-rank. So, anong example niyan? Class rank. So, di ba dito sa perpetual, meron tayong with honor. Next, with high honor. And then last, with highest honor. So, di ba na we have a rank na nag-range from low, which is from with honor, and then dun sa pinakamataas, which is kay with highest honor. So, ibig sabihin, if there is a category, and then at the same time is, you can arrange it from low to high, which is yung pinakamababa hanggang pinakamataas, so that will fall on the ordinal level. Okay, next, i-discuss naman natin si interval level. So, ito namang si interval level is meron siyang characteristic katulad ng kay ordinal. So, anong nadagdag sa kanya? Ang nadagdag kasi dyan is, anong nadagdag na criteria kay ordinal level? Ang nadagdag na interval level. Ang nadagdag sa kanya is the equal interval. Which means, ang isang value is merong equal interval. So, anong ibig sabihin yan? Another example of that is the temperature. For example, 0 degrees Celsius. So, di ba, first, meron siyang category. So, check. Next is, na-arrange mo siya. So, di ba, yung temperature, na-arrange mo from napakalamig hanggang sobrang init. Di ba? You can arrange it. So, check. Next, anong next natin? Ang next natin is equal interval. Which means, itong value na to, any value has an equal interval. Ibig sabihin, for example, kay 0 degrees Celsius, may katumbas ba yan na value? Yes or no? Isipin nyo, kapag yung temperature natin 0 degrees Celsius, may nararamdaman ba kayo? May mararamdaman ba kayo? Diba the answer is yes? Diba? So, ibig sabihin, if there is a certain value, kapag yung 0 natin, merong certain value, that would be fall under interval level. Kasi, that has an equal interval. However, kapag ratio level naman is meron siyang category or meron siyang criteria ng kay interval, anong nadagdag? 0 point. So, ano ibig sabihin ng 0 point? Ang ibig sabihin ng 0 point is kapag 0, 0 talaga. So, ano example niyan? Yung volume ng mga TV natin. Diba sa volume ng TV natin, kapag 0, ano ibig sabihin niyan? Wala kang marinig. Diba? Kapag 0 yung volume ng TV nyo, wala kang marinig. So, ibig sabihin, tandaan nyo lang para hindi kayo malito ha. Kapag sa interval level kasi, yung 0 natin, meron siyang certain value. Unlike dito, kay ratio level, kapag 0, 0 talaga. Kapag wala, wala. Diba? So, another example ni ratio level? Another example ni ratio level is yung battery percent or level ng inyong mga cellphone. Di ba kapag 0, wala na talaga yan? Patay na talaga yan? Diba? Next, ano pa ba? For the interval level, yung time. Di ba yung time natin kapag 0, 0? Ayan. Kapag nakita nyo yan, military time yan eh. Kapag nakita nyo yung 0, 0, ano ibig sabihin yan? Alas 12 na. Eksaktong alas 12 ng 12 midnight. It's exactly 12 midnight. Okay? So, ibig sabihin kapag yung 0 natin, there is a certain value. So, that is what we call interval level. Kapag sinabi naman natin na ratio, is ang 0 natin is 0 talaga. Okay? So, anihin natin na baka malito kayo. So, di ba we have two types of variable. For example, number of children in a family. Kunyari, yan yung top answer ko. So, di ba number of children in a family. So, ito bang si number of children in a family siya? Ano siya? Quantity or quality? So, di ba quantity siya. Next, itong number of children in a family. Ano siya? Discrete or continuous. Diba discrete siya? Ayan. So, if discrete siya, so alam natin na once na quantity na yan, meron na yung levels of measurement. Tandaan nyo na ang levels of measurement is nag-a-apply lang kay quantitative variable. Si qualitative variable po, wala siyang levels of measurement. Okay? Now, itong si number of family, ano siya? Is it nominal, ordinal, ratio, or interval? Okay, so that would be fall under ratio. So, bakit siya naging ratio? First, there is a category. Next, meron yung order mula kay panganay hanggang pangalawa, pangatlo, pang-apat. Next, meron yung equal interval. And then the last is 0 point, which is kung walang anak, walang anak. Diba? So, kapag sinabi kasi dyan na number of family tapos 0, so, diba, ang emphasis nun, ibig sabihin nun, wala siyang anak. Or, walang, nag-iisa lang siya sa buhay. Diba? So, hindi siya pwedeng maging interval kasi anong ibig sabihin ng interval? There is a certain value. So, that's end our lesson for today's meeting. I hope that this lesson na maaalala nyo. Okay? So that's end our lesson for today's activity, which is Introduction to Statistics. So I hope that you've learned for today. Thank you and God bless you. So goodbye. Thank you.